But let's go straight to Peter Cardwell, who is, of course, a political commentator and talk presenter who joins us outside Number 10 right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Very much appreciate that. Right, so you got the short straw, so you had to go to the Rose Garden to listen to this speech. First of all, I mean, we know that Keir Starmer chose the Rose Garden not just because it's nice weather, but because, let's be honest, we'll all be reminded, won't we, of Dominic Cummings and his trip to Barnard Castle, but also, of course, the Partygate parties in Rose Garden as well. But basically, this was about Keir Starmer saying things are different now.
Yes, and he was very deliberate and actually pointed and gestured to a couple of bits of the garden where certain things had happened, where the lockdown parties had happened, those famous photographs of the wicker furniture and people outside Downing Street. And he was in the garden and he was very clear, and he said that the building and the garden were back in the service of public service, as he put it. It's interesting as well, a number of questions from the media. I wasn't asked for one, but a number of my colleagues, political colleagues, were asked for them. And a lot of people asking about this probity issue, the issue of Lord Ali getting a pass, for example. A Labour donor is given £500,000 he's paid for Keir Starmer's spectacles, presumably the ones he was wearing a minute ago.
By the way, why is a man, Keir Starmer, I mean, he's so well off, having been a former director of public prosecutions and even in his job as leader of the opposition, that, you know, I mean, he's got a lovely big posh house in Islington. He's, you know, he's earning stupid money. His pension is so high that as former director of public prosecutions, there had to be an individual act of parliament to protect it from tax. How can he not afford his own suits and glasses?
I think he probably can afford them, but it's a matter of the donor wanting to pay for very sleek clothing. I must say, if Lord Ali wants to buy me a suit, that's fine. Also, I quite like Aslef to be in negotiations for my next contract.
Totally.
And he was asked about that as well. He was, and on a very serious note, of course, he was asked about ASLEF trained drivers getting a 50% pay rise. There's money for that. There's money for 22% rises for junior doctors, yet 10 million pensioners, many of whom have given you and me a ring over the last few days, Julia, to tell us about the winter they're facing ahead with the energy prices going up and so on. Yet there's no money for them. That money has been taken away from not all pensioners, but from 10 million of them. So those questions were asked, and of course he talked about tough choices. He said he didn't come into politics to do that. He said that there was a black hole that he didn't know about, that the Office of Budget Responsibility didn't know about either, and said that there will be pain ahead, especially in the budget coming up at the end of October.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute rubbish to I mean, it's a blatant lie, frankly, to claim that they didn't know about this black hole. They you know, most of it's actually of their making, but we all knew the finances were in a dire state, and people like me and you were, you know, pointing out, you know, when they issued manifestos, and the Institute of Fiscal Studies pointing out that they, you know, the numbers didn't add up, by the way, for any of the parties. But let's go through a little bit about what you said in terms of, like, we've done more in 7 weeks than the Tories did in 7 years. There's a lot about how, you know, there's not just an economic black hole, he said, but a societal black hole. And he's talked about how it won't be business as usual when Parliament returns next week, because we can't go on like this anymore. There is a budget coming in October, he said. It's going to be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation we are in. I mean, he's talking about the UK, the summer riots had exposed a deeply unhealthy society, weakened by a decade of division and decline. I mean, it's really sort of, you know, apocalyptic about, you know, we are in this sort of terrible state, and talking about how it was going to take a decade to recover from. He's already bidding for a second term.
Yes, he is, and a lot about stopping the rot, fixing the foundations. He had that three-word phrase on his lectern, fixing the foundations, and saying that actually there needs to be, in Keir Starmer's view, a whole rebuilding of the whole system, not just the bits of government, but actually the whole system for the country to flourish. And he talked about 14 years of decline, decay, rot, all of these kind of ideas of decay and ideas of disintegration. And now he's saying that all of that needs to be sort of cleared away. The foundations need to be sort of dug out and Britain rebuilt. So lots of pain ahead, he says, but also the fact that so much damage, in his view, has been done by the Conservatives over the past 14 years. So blaming them, certainly, and also saying that the tough choices are basically their fault. Really interesting one, actually, on prisons as well. He said it was outrageous for him to actually have to look at individual individual prison places and look at how few there were. Prison service acting at 99% capacity. I know that was actually the case for at least 6 months before the Conservatives left. And he said it was in the Cobra room, in the emergency committee room, looking at that. He said that was an outrageous thing for a Prime Minister to have to do, and enough prison places simply were not built under the Conservatives. So no actual plan to build more prison places.
Yes, no,
but actually to say, what's the alternative to letting people out?
What are they actually going to do? Yeah, just let out a load of people. But again, maybe don't imprison people for tweets. I'm just going to throw. Not some people didn't commit crimes with those tweets, but maybe not imprison them. But especially as we've discovered today, and again, this happened under the Tories. You know, people actually committing sex offences, knife offences, and just having to say sorry and not even getting a criminal record, which a lot of people would be very unhappy about. But this is the thing. Look. It's a bank holiday weekend we've just come out of. A lot of people very sensibly add on the bank holiday, you know, take a week's holiday during the bank holidays. Kids aren't back at school until next week, most people, or even a bit later. So, you know, you take this week's holiday. Realistically, MPs are coming back to Parliament tomorrow. A lot of people, you know, political journalists have all come back off their holes since the election. But actually, an awful lot of people still on holiday. People who aren't on holiday are back at work today. They're busy. They are not watching what Keir Starmer is saying in the Rose Garden at number 10. People want to know about specific things. How are you going to make my life better? How do I get my operation? You know, will my grandmother be able to afford her heating in the winter and things like that? They want practical things. Do you think any of this is going to change anything, or is this just the scene setter for what is going to be an absolutely horrific budget?
I think it's both, actually. I think he is saying that there are going to be a lot of bills, a lot of legislation that's going to happen between now and Christmas. That was part of the speech where he said fixing the foundations, as he puts it, this phrase, that things will be done, legislation will be passed in order to do that. And of course, Labour has a massive majority, so it's very easy to do that. In terms of the budget, though, that's going to be the big one. Obviously, that's the 30th of October. He said he didn't want to preempt things, but he did say that those with the broadest shoulders would have more pain. So certainly he's talking about non-DOMs, he's talking about higher rate taxpayers and so on. He didn't get into the specifics in regard to things like corporation tax. He did say that the guarantee remains, apparently, on things like national insurance, income tax, and the other one, the third one.
VAT. Don't worry.
VAT.
Don't worry, they'll forget as well, Peter. Don't worry.
I was thinking of only fools and horses, no income tax, no VAT. So that's how
now we're going to have that song in our brains. That's even more than having Wonderwall in our brains today. Thank you very much, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Roll with that, Julia.
Oh, God. We're definitely maybe going to end this interview right now. Thank you very much.